Is it great to be alive on a Friday in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center or what? These are Snap Judgments. They're back. You can tell that spring ball is coming. That's Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. We heard from Ryan Day and 10 full-time assistant coaches talking about Ohio State, the offseason, winter workouts, spring ball. I am pumped. We're just talking ball, Bill.
Felt pretty good to be back in here talking ball, looking forward, talking about some new players. Yeah, it was a nice time. I got fired up too.
I said it to Bill as Keenan Bailey was wrapping up. He was the last guy to speak, and I just like listening to him talk because he's so excited about football. And I think maybe we've spent 2 months going, hey, is the offseason over yet? And it is. It's over. Except for next week when they go on spring break, and then they practice after that. But for the most part, it's over, and we're back to ball.
Yeah, for all intents and purposes, it is over. Ohio State had some mat drills. You had Mickey Marotti walking around in his mechanic shirt. They did that on Friday morning as they're closing down this shortened, abbreviated, condensed period of winter workouts and getting ready for that first practice on Monday the 17th. So it's coming, and there's going to be some new coaches out there. We have a lot to cover. Ryan Day gives half an hour. There's a ton of stuff to get through. Matt Patricia, Tyler Bowen, Billy Fessler, their first press conferences. So I don't even know where to begin, Bill, with what your first takeaway might be.
I would start with Patricia. It seemed like that was the guy that Ryan Day got asked about the most. Questions about like adjusting to college, which I think are probably fair. I don't know that I have any concerns about that. I just was interested in sort of the process and how thorough Ryan Day was with that. He said he made a ton of phone calls, talked to a lot of people, including like Nate Ebner, about what it's like to play for Matt Patricia. It seems like the defensive staff is really excited for him to be taken over and being that guy. And I didn't hear all of Patricia. I know you heard more of him, but I'll just say one thing that I did hear, which I actually thought was like a very good answer. He was asked about like Detroit and what he learned from his time in Detroit. And I'm sure he was expecting it, so he had an answer ready, but the answer was good. He said like coming from New England, where the expectation every year is to win a Super Bowl, and then the year before, like they won it in 16, they lost it in 17. He said like if he was still in New England, all it would be is like we're going back. But then he left and went to a place where that was very much not the expectation, but took that same mindset and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And he said, like, I wasn't the best version of myself as a coach when I was in Detroit. Like, I didn't handle that well. Said he learned a lot. So, I think most of the questions we have about that hire aren't going to be really answered until Ohio State starts playing football, and that's totally fine. But I thought from, like, an approach of, like, that was an experience that didn't go great, but I still learned something from it, I thought what he said was pretty interesting.
Well, and he had to say that he needed to learn things from being away from football and on the sideline last year and not being a full-time coach like that. For somebody whose whole livelihood as a head coach or a defensive coordinator is built up into that competition and that schedule and being around football at the highest level, like that is not an easy adjustment. I don't think that he loved it, but you have to take those lessons, whether that is Detroit or whether that is not having the kind of job that you want for a period of time. And he said that he was spending like every day with Bill Belichick, and they had their podcast or their coaching video series that they were working on that helped, but they were, he was still trying to take some positives out of that experience. And, I think the three of us have said this a number of times, whether it was Ryan Day or Jeff Hafley, is like, you come away and you're like, wow, that guy really gets it. I could see him being a head coach someday. Well, Matt Patricia has already done that. And I think I could see why. Yeah. And I could see what the process in the interview with Ryan Day was probably like and why Ryan Day believes so strongly that Matt Patricia can be that head coach of the defense.
Well, I asked Ryan straight up, like, did you hire a guy like that because the offensive staff is so young, or you're going to be forced to spend more time there? And he said yes, and then he went on a diatribe about other stuff. But, like, it's pretty clear that he felt he can trust Matt Patricia. And I don't think, coming off of a national championship, coming off of what Ryan Day has learned in the last few years, the idea that he would give the defense to someone he doesn't completely trust is short-sighted. I think he has to. Now, there's no proof of concept yet with this current arrangement, but I think some of it also comes down to the fact that Ryan Day has an idea now of what he wants to do for his defense, which he's always sort of had. When he started here, hiring Jeff Hafley set the blueprint for what they wanted this defense to be. And so I asked Tim Walton, I'm like, it's easy if a new offensive coordinator takes over for Chip Kelly because it's Ryan Day's offense and you know what you're going to get. Is it now Matt Patricia's defense? Is it still the Jim Knowles defense? And Tim Walton just said, it's Ohio State's defense. We're going to do all of it. We're going to do stuff we had with Jim Knowles. We're going to do new stuff from Matt. We're going to go back to stuff that was there before either one of those guys got there. So I think for Matt Patricia, the one thing that Ryan Day said, like he's multiple. He's going to do different things. He's going to adapt, and that seems to be the crux of why he was the right choice.
He got into some of that with scheme and personnel because I asked about it, following up on some of the things that he talked about with, Julian Edelman on that podcast. And when he walked over, I talked to him a little bit before and afterwards. He was like, "You're going to hear me say excited a lot. Like that's just going to be the theme." And he did say that a lot. And it was because what they were doing in New England and the way he described it to me was like they had to reverse engineer. So they were picking at the end of the draft. They did have some guiding principles early on, but then they just decided, well, you have to find the best player and then build scheme and adjust from there. You're coming into a place at Ohio State. You aren't picking at the end of the draft. You're essentially picking first in almost every situation. And Matt Patricia had an opportunity in some ways to pick first with the job that he wanted. And it's like, well, you go into the building. So the first person you go look at is Caleb Downs. And then you see Sonny Styles and you see Arvell Reese. And he is thinking about what that would have meant like for him and Bill Belichick in New England's defense and what that can look like. He said, you don't have to say that it is exactly going to be 4-3 or 3-4. It's going to be a lot of different packages and a lot of different ways to use the skill set of the best players and one of the best rosters in America. So he's only scratching the surface of that. He's only been in here for a few weeks and he hasn't had his first practice yet. But you can already like just see the wheels spinning and the pencil behind the ear. He said he was jotting down notes from watching mat drills on Friday morning. So like you can tell that he is both feet in with what could happen and what this defense could look like.
It's very interesting to me because he said this, he was at the Super Bowl making the rounds and he was with like Front Row Sports, and he said one of the things that interests him about college football is like the roster building aspect of it. He said him and Bill Belichick talked a ton about that. And I think what he was getting at is what you just mentioned. It's like, it's not a draft situation. Like if you're at the right place, you can kind of pick who you want. But it's funny to me that like both those guys, Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia, like had that conversation. We're intrigued by the idea, but Matt Patricia gets to come do it here, where it's like actually true. Bill Belichick, I guess, is going to try to do it at UNC. We'll see if it works.
Spoiler alert, it won't.
But I think like if those were the things that like really interested Matt Patricia about the college game, there's no doubt that he'll be able to experience all that here.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk probably a lot more about Matt Patricia and the defense on the podcast daily next week as we get ready for spring camp. So let's shift gears over to the offensive side where you have Brian Hartline. A lot of conversation from Ryan Day about the confidence he has in Hartline. Brian Hartline, again, asked a lot about what that experience 2 years ago was like, where he was, sort of in line for that, didn't quite happen. Ryan Day keeps calling plays. Chip Kelly comes in the ensuing year, what he's learned since then. And then you have Tyler Bowen, and I think it's the combination of those two, maybe more so than just Brian Hartline being the last voice on the headset that's so important, because that the passing game coordination is going to be pretty good with Billy Fessler, Brian Hartline, and Keenan Bailey all back. It's the Tyler Bowen, it's the offensive line part that I think is more intriguing to me.
Yeah, the run game piece of it too. I asked Tyler Bowen a little bit about that, like where his influences come from with the run game. He played for Ralph Friedgen. He said that was a big part of it. Obviously, Joe Moorhead. And he said at Virginia Tech, like their roster was like a weird situation. They were kind of adapting on the fly to what that was. But he wants a diverse run scheme. He wants to be wants a versatile run scheme. Does not want to necessarily like hang their hat on one or two concepts. I think it's perhaps a similar approach to like Chip Kelly, where it's a little bit game plan specific. First of all, it's personnel specific, what your line can do, what the running back can see, but then best practices for attacking that particular defense, whatever week it might be. So that was like refreshing to hear, I think. I didn't ask Tyler Bowen this specifically or explicitly, but like he is stepping into some pretty big shoes to try to replace, I guess, for lack of a better word, the guy who is widely regarded as one of the best run game minds at any level of football. But he seems pretty sharp. I think maybe the thing, like hearing a little bit from all of the offensive coaches, is that they seem to have an ability to like articulate pretty well. Like I think the biggest thing with being an assistant coach is like being organized and then being able to convey your thoughts. Convey your thoughts to young athletes in a way that gets the best out of them. And it does seem like these offensive coaches, especially because they're all pretty young with the exception of Carlos Loughlin, who also is still young. He's just not young by comparison, I guess. They seem to have that. So like I don't know. Like it's March and the games don't start till August, so we'll see what happens then. But I came away feeling pretty encouraged, I guess, about like the energy and just the way that like all these young offensive coaches kind of handle their business.
Well, the energy is certainly real. Like when you have this many young guys that are coaching at this level, like they know this is a mountain. I mean, Tyler Bowen basically said like he thinks Ohio State is the best program in the country. That's why he wanted to come here. I asked him specifically, how does the how does the messaging change to recruits when you are at Virginia Tech one day and then you're at Ohio State the next? And he said, all I have to do is tell them this is why I came to Ohio State. Like Virginia Tech was great, but this is Ohio State. To what Bill was saying, he said he wants a vertical run game that eliminates tackles for losses and what did he call it, chaos or havoc?
Havoc. Yeah.
And then he said that they will start with a number of concepts and then wind down as they get towards the figuring out what they do best. And I think for Ohio State, he mentioned Joe Moorhead. Billy Fessler mentioned Joe Moorhead as his influence and the guy that really molded him. And it's funny because Joe Moorhead was trying pretty hard to get the offensive coordinator job at Ohio State last year and this. So it's a branch of the Ryan Day tree that I didn't know really existed. But
if you can hire all of Joe Moorhead's top assistants without having to hire Joe Moorhead,
it seems like a good plan. Because Akron can't win football games. I feel bad for the guy. He's obviously a really good coach, but he's just stuck at Akron. What you get?
No one's holding him there.
Well, I mean, money. You want to get paid. You want to have a jab.
Okay.
You want to have a job.
Yeah, that's true.
I just think that this group is really going to be fun to watch, and this spring specifically is going to be. Something we talked about at the Roosters on Monday, like about the quarterbacks, but I think it applies to the entirety of the roster. This spring is not as much about competition as it is about learning, installation, education. We were talking to Brian Hartline for a brief moment, and he said, this is not about figuring out who the starting quarterback is. It's not about it's about making sure that the guys know what they're doing. And Brian Hartline mentioned that he had, when he took the job in 23, as the offensive coordinator when he's promoted, how difficult of a situation the roster was in with changing from C.J. Stroud to Kyle McCord and trying to find a quarterback. He said it's a lot of similar issues this time around, but it said the difference is actually Tyler Bowen. And not just Tyler Bowen, but Charlie Dickey and Marcus Johnson with him. Because when Justin Fry was trying to coordinate...
Well, Charles, he called him.
Well, Charles. He's an older gentleman. Charles is an older gentleman.
Chuck D.
When it was Brian Hartline and Ryan Day, and then Justin Fry was trying to handle all the run stuff by himself, essentially, I don't think that maybe they didn't support the run game enough in that instance. And this time around, that seems to be the priority.
Yeah.
Nice. Because their run game was quite bad that year.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and I think part of that is you had the Kevin Wilson influence that was gone, and it wasn't fully replaced, I guess, from the outside if you look at it. And that would be a lot to put on Brian Hartline's plate, and probably why that overall coaching transition that Ryan Day was trying to make didn't happen at the time that he wanted. And then Chip Kelly helped alleviate that a year ago. And Ryan Day was sort of alluding to this during his press conference, which was he saw the benefit of pulling back on the play calling a year ago, doesn't want to go back to that. And the other thing that they learned maybe from 2 years ago is not just for Brian Hartline developing as a play caller, a coordinator, organizer, whatever else you want to put on that. It was like, well, Ryan Day needs to have an overall vision and support that emphasizes the run game as well, which is what he did a year ago. And now I think Tyler Bowen, that's why it became such a good fit. Maybe not the first person that immediately came to mind for us during that process, but you guys spent more time talking to him than I did. It feels like some of that. I always go back to the way that they communicate with the media. And that's our clearest glimpse into what they would do in position meetings or on the field. That's why I put stock in it. You can say, well, you don't have to win the press conference, and that's true, but that you have no more insight, no greater insight into how they are as a communicator than when they have to go do it in front of 40 strangers.
Tyler Bowen was impressive. I mean, aside from just the fact that he's a monster, he makes Bill look small.
He's not that big.
He makes Bill look tiny.
I think he's big.
He's bigger than you, and therefore big.
I didn't stand next to him. What to do?
You're big for no reason, as you say. He was big for some reason. He played obviously offensive line at Maryland, but then
he also walked in and he punched Bill in the face. He's like, you got to find the biggest person on the beat,
take him out,
and you got to send a message.
Everyone knows that. That's rule number one. But and then you mix in his experience. He's been a coach for 15 years.
It's crazy. He's 35.
He's 35. He's been a coach for 15 years in college football. And then you talk to him, and he's got this very southern drawl, which was a surprise.
Threw me for a loop because in my head he's from Maryland,
but he's from Georgia.
Smart.
So there's a lot of things, and you don't need to win a press conference, as you said, but when you're talking to the players in that room, if you don't win that first day with them, you have a real tough time winning them back.
That's true.
And so that I don't think it's an accident that these guys generally make good first impressions because they're winners and they're people who've excelled in life to be at a place like Ohio State at this point in his very young career, even though he's been a coach for almost half of his life.
Tyler Bowen said, and I guess this is maybe his common practice for most assistant coaches, but he said the first thing he wanted to do was meet with every single offensive lineman individually. He said from between 20 minutes to sometimes they got to 45 minutes to like learn about their journey, learn about what they've done here, what they want to do here, and then for him to convey to them his journey and where he's been, what his influences are, how he thinks about the offensive line position, and why he's here, and to kind of get everybody kind of on that same sort of familiar page before they do anything on the football field. And I guess we haven't talked to the players to see how that went, but he seemed to feel like it went pretty well.
Yeah. We'll have, again, a ton of time to unpack all of that in every position group as we get ready for spring practice on the podcast daily next week. But in terms of personnel, aside from talking about the quarterbacks, which we'll do, the only thing that stood out to me was Larry Johnson specifically saying CJ Hicks is in that room, defensive line room. Larry Johnson's excited to get him to do some things that aren't just be a third down pass rusher and standing up on the edge. So they feel like that relationship is off to a good start. The position transition, the potential, the opportunity that CJ's bought in on that, Larry Johnson's bought in on that. I don't think there's any real surprises other than that, but at least that's some public confirmation of something that we thought was going to happen, Berm.
Yeah, I mean, we were told pretty explicitly prior to the Rose Bowl, this is going to happen, but to have Larry come out, Larry generally is not always willing to spill the beans, so it's good that he was able to do that because we're going to see it. You know, we're going to be out here in 10 days and they're going to be doing acclamation. Hey, I said it right. Yes. Hey, nice.
Good job, Berm.
Thanks. All right. I always say that word wrong for some reason.
Acclimatization.
Yeah. But CJ, as we've talked about it a number of times, that doesn't work if he's not 100% into it.
Yeah.
And he wants to be that guy. And I think Ohio State's going to get the best out of him in doing that. And it certainly helps Larry Johnson and that group, which, as we've talked about earlier in this week, is lacking a little bit in who are the guys?
Mm-hmm.
Who are they? Now we know one more.
James Laurinaitis said when Ohio State hired Matt Patricia, the first person he thought of was CJ Hicks, which I think we might have said when they hired Matt Patricia too, but it was just funny to me that Laurinaitis was thinking that way. So yeah, they're pretty excited about it.
Yeah, I think I said that from the airport in Las Vegas. That's the kind of chess piece that Matt Patricia has talked about and now has done in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center after his first press conference at Ohio State. A lot to learn from it, and we will continue to do that and break it down in the days ahead, but had to get into some snap judgments right away on a Friday in the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. Thanks for joining us on the podcast. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I'm Austin Ward. Have a great weekend, folks. We'll see you on Monday.